I am Sean Webb, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Zach Poitras, and this is Your Superior Self.
I'm Andy Mant, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Sue Jackson, and this is Your Superior Self.
I'm Ginny Sarasvati, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. I'm Trey Downs, and today is going to be an amazing interview. I have Dr. Ben Hardy on the show, crushing our interview. And I'm leaving that in there, Marissa. So everyone who just heard that, that's my wife making fun of me right now. Oh, the joys of having a funny comedian wife. But Ben Hardy, he's an organizational psychologist and he best-selling author of the book Willpower Doesn't Work. And he's actually the number one writer in the world, or he was the number one writer in the world on the platform medium.com. And Mr. Dr. Hardy just recently wrote a book titled Personality Isn't Permanent, and I read it and I loved every bit of it because basically it talks to you about how you're not your personality. Like, your personality changes over time, and science proves you're gonna change throughout your life, and you might as well be intentional about that change. So there's a quote that I love to live my life by, and it's I don't know if you guys have heard it before, probably on the show. I say it quite a bit, but the same man, or a man doesn't step in the same stream twice, meaning he's not the same man, and the river or the stream is not the same river. And I don't know if you get that or not, but basically we change all the time, and it's something to live my life by. That I'm not the same person that I was a year ago. I'm not the same person that I was 6 months ago. I mean, I'm not even the same person that I was yesterday. When you think about it scientifically, the body, the cells in your body are continuously dying and reproducing and changing. I mean, it's scientifically proven. You're not the same person that you were a week ago, biologically. So personality-wise, it makes sense that you change all the time with your growth, with the things that you learn, your experiences, your troubles. Everything gets you stronger for the future. And we have a very in-depth conversation about that. We actually go as far as start talking about Viktor Frankl's book and what it means to us and how we apply it to our lives. And here's a little clip of that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a must read for anyone and everyone.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, that's why he said he was able to get through it, is because he had a purpose beyond the concentration camp that he had to live for from his perspective. And so, the people who didn't see a purpose, their hope was shattered by the situation or by the trauma of everything they saw. They just lost the will to live. They lost the will to meaning, is what he would say. There was just no more meaning left in their life. This is another quote he said that's really interesting. He said, it is a peculiarity of man that he can only live by looking to the future. I think that's kind of crucial, is that you can only really be present by actually working towards a future. If you don't have hope in the future, that's why I actually think it's bad advice to say that the future doesn't exist. It's bad advice to say that the past doesn't exist either, because time is a lot more flowing than that. And your past obviously impacts your present. If you didn't have memory, then you wouldn't even be able to have a conversation. But your future also really impacts your present, and so from Frankl's perspective, you can only live by looking to the future. That's his view of psychology.
And it's going to be a good interview when we're quoting Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And speaking of books, make sure you guys go out there and buy Personality Isn't Permanent by Dr. Ben Hardy. I love the book. I highly suggest it. And for no other reason, just go buy it because my man's got 6 kids, and I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he does all the promotion for the book and writing a book, but yeah, Ben Hardy's a good dude, and I love this conversation. So before we get started, just want to remind you that you can follow me on social media on Instagram at tdowns80 and on Twitter at downstrey. Go to yoursuperiorself.com to find out more about the show and the reason why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. You can also leave me a message over there. I love to hear from you guys, and I love to hear your stories and what you guys got going on in your lives. And I'm looking to expand the show a little bit more and the spirituality category, as far as like the hypnosis, life between lives, near-death experiences, and sort of like the past life regressions aspects. So if you know any influencers in that realm, that would be amazing. I find it fascinating, and keeping an open mindset about those types of philosophies and theories. So guys, I'm excited about this conversation. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Ben Hardy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and this is Your Superior Self.
Dr. Hardy, thank you so much for joining the show, man. I really do appreciate the time, and I know we had a couple of troubles with technology, but I appreciate it, man.
No worries, dude. Glad to be with you.
So your new book, Personality Isn't Permanent, got the PDF, read it, love it. Thank you so much for writing that book, man.
You're welcome.
I see that we have some connections in common, like Andre Norman.
How do you know Andre?
So he came on the show, and we hit it off. I love his story, and it's inside your book. I think it's great. How'd you guys connect?
I met him through Joe Polish.
Okay.
He's kind of, Joe's to some degree adopted Andre, and Andre is big in the Genius Network world. So I met Andre, loved his story, and just thought it was really good for this book.
That's awesome, man. I love Andre. I mean, could you imagine, like, I'm reading the part in your book where he's in isolation. Like, I couldn't even imagine sitting in isolation by myself and having to, meet my ego, you're a psychologist. I mean, all that comes with that. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. What I like about Andre's story is it really kind of reflects that your goal or your purpose is the thing that's shaping your identity, which obviously over time becomes your personality. And I think what Andre does, which maybe not all of us do, is he questions his goals. He questions the thing he's chasing, and he realized in his case that it was the yellow brick road to nowhere. He called it his Wizard of Oz moment. And I think more of us could have that experience if we were honest with ourselves.
Absolutely. I love your story, man. I'm big in psychology. Like, I'm trying to learn my path, and I am interested in the same things you are, leadership and finding that. And I mean, you have your PhD in, I think it's IO, right?
Yep, it is IO, industrial and organizational psychology.
So how did you figure that out for yourself? Like, what was that path like?
Yeah, so I actually ended up serving a church mission, which really taught me a lot about leadership, got me interested in psychology. I watched myself change a lot. I grew up in a really traumatic environment. Father was a very big drug addict, zero stability. And so when I went on that church mission, I just learned a lot. I got into journaling, got into reading, got into service, and just watched myself change a lot. And I really enjoyed just the structure of leadership training. And I wasn't really sure when I got home if I was going to study like clinical psychology, counseling. Actually, the first time I applied to graduate programs, I applied to clinical and counseling because I thought maybe I'd go more therapeutic. But then actually I met a guy, me and my wife were traveling in China, and I met a guy who was like the number one trainer at Apple. I think the program was called Leader or Trainer. And he trained all the leadership throughout Asia in Apple. And I just asked him, like, how'd you get this job? It sounds really cool. And he's like, I got into the job from a really roundabout way because he had a law degree, but he's like, but my boss is an IO psychologist. And so I was like, that was like in between me applying for grad programs. And so I just looked more into IO because that was something I hadn't learned much about. And I just thought, this is really cool. I'm not a traditional IO psychologist. I'm not going to go work for organizations. I'm not going to go I could go do it. I've been trained to do it, but it's not really my interest. But I loved the study. I loved learning about teams, loved learning about training, culture, leadership. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it's great too. I think the whole process that comes with decision making and seeing the psychology behind that and knowing what the brain is actually struggling with when to make a decision and all the factors that it has to go through and inputs. I think it's amazing. I think a lot of people should learn more about it. That's like, so right now I have some experience in the corporate side of things. So like I'm gaining interest in the psychology world, and I'm thinking about right now. I'm going back to school for one, and I'm getting my business degree, and then I planned on getting my graduate degree in IO, and then looking for a PhD in that. Same thing as you. Now, is IO like something that's new, or is it something that's been around for a while?
It's it's been around probably since the 70s or 80s, but like it's emerging as a big field. Like, it's becoming a lot more relevant, a lot bigger of a field there, and it's seen as a lot more serious. Like when you heard about psychology, you probably wouldn't hear about it in big programs until more recently. So it's emerging as a really big field in psychology, but that's more in the last like maybe 15 years, and it's now just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So what made you write this book?
Personality Isn't Permanent. Well, I wrote Willpower Doesn't Work, which was my first book because, addiction was such a big part of my life. And obviously willpower is a stupid way to try to overcome an addiction. You really need to kind of let go and get help from other people in that case and admit you can't do it by yourself. And in 2018, actually, Joe Polish told me to read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Not sure if you've read that one.
No, I haven't. Not that.
Yeah, it's kind of the definitive book on trauma. And he and I had actually gone up to a Gabor Mate conference, and Gabor Mate is big on trauma as well. And I was reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score, from the perspective of finding out how trauma led to addiction. But what I was most surprised about was how much it talked about personality and about how unresolved trauma, obviously shapes people's personality. It freezes you, keeps you stuck in the past, leads you to being emotionally rigid, basically builds a wall around your comfort zone. And it stops you from being flexible and imaginative, shatters hope, all the things you kind of need to move forward. And I thought that was really interesting. Like the book's not fully about trauma, but that's obviously a huge aspect of it. But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. And I'd heard other things about personality, and so I just felt like I needed to explain it because I think there's a lot of unexplained things when it comes to personality. Like, for example, all the personality tests. Like, I just felt like it was the book that needed to be written. And so I felt like I should write it.
It's awesome, man. So like when you graduate with a PhD in leadership and IO, like you say, you're not the traditional go work with a corporation, but what are some of the other jobs that you can do as far as being, having a PhD at that level?
In IO? Oh, yeah. Man. I mean, you're trained in science. You could develop tests if you want. That's one of the things I learned over and over was, test development, test validation. So, you could build tests if you want. You could be a statistician. You could be an internal consultant. You could build your own consultancy. You're trained to do so many things. A lot of people have their own consultancy, and they're hired by huge companies to either help them with their hiring or their firing or their training. You're essentially you're trained to have all the tools in the tool belt for how to operate an organization, as far as how to on the psychological side, how to actually if you need to just rework all the leadership, or how culture is built. You're trained how to do it. So a lot of huge companies hire tons of IO psychologists and they're, we're trained a lot in statistics and stuff. So, we study actually how to get results. So there's a lot of different applications. As for myself, I was already just writing books and stuff when I was in the program, and I was more interested in kind of just the actual research. I wasn't actually interested in creating research. Sure. So for me, I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think I'm very interested in the leadership portion. Like, what makes a leader? What makes a good leader, right? Is there something that's set up in our mind? Are we wired differently? Is it because if that isn't true, then everyone would be a leader, right? There's something different that leaders possess, and I think, I'm trying to figure it out. I want to be a better leader, right?
There's other studies you could do. You could even just study leadership. there's, and that would be maybe more, you could do psychology. IO would definitely be the best fit for that probably, but you could study, there's leadership programs just straight up. They may be more into the educational realm, but you don't have to go into the deeps. IO psychology would require a lot of statistics on your part. And for me, that was actually the worst part about doing the program, to be honest with you, is I had to take so many statistics courses. But there's other ways you could study leadership as well.
Sure. Has IO, studying psychology, has it made you a better husband?
Probably not, honestly. I've learned a lot. My wife, she got a bachelor's in psychology. I met her in a psychology program, and then we, she was doing a master's in social work, and she was literally at the complete end of it. Is all she had to do was finish some courses, and we were actually doing therapy together. And she decided to bail on it, like at the very last minute. She might end up going back and getting a different master's, but I mean, we've both studied so much psychology, and it definitely influences our thinking. I mean, we have lots of psychological conversations. I think it could help.
Sure. Well, I mean, you guys are kind of similar.
I would say it's probably helped me. I mean, I would be dumb to say it hasn't, but I could have learned similar lessons outside of IO.
Sure. No, I'm becoming more aware of things, right? Like, so before I feel like I was asleep to things. Like I didn't know what consciousness, like awareness of consciousness, awareness of like the chemical reactions in your brain when you feel something, like I'm reading a lot of stuff about like the chemicals that are triggered, like dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, things like that, and trying to understand what happens, why you're feeling like that. And I think it's very interesting. I mean, psychology is so deep, man. Like there's so many different like areas you can study and learn about. I think for me though, what really inspires me, like, what is it? What is neuroscience? Like, what is that? Is that learning what, basically each like part of the brain and its function, or is that still psychology?
Neuroscience and psychology are very similar. It's really tough to say what the difference is. I think neuroscience is purely focused on the brain, whereas general psychology, I mean, a lot of my psychology professors were neuroscientists.
Sure.
And so like, if you go get a degree in neuroscience, it actually may be to some degree viewed as more credible in various populations because it's just like pure brain. Whereas psychology, it's a mixed bag. There's totally different views, different professors. It's more general.
Who's been your biggest influence in psychology?
Probably Brent Slife, Ellen Langer, Adam Grant. Adam Grant's obviously more popular. I also really like Daniel Gilbert. Daniel Gilbert wrote a book called Stumbling on Happiness. So Brent Slife, he wrote a book called Time and Psychological Explanation. That book really influenced my book. So Brent Slife, and then Ellen Langer, she's been at Harvard. She studied mindfulness for a long time. Her two books are Mindfulness and then Counterclockwise. Really interesting books. Obviously Adam Grant's more popular now. He wrote Give and Take. He writes more popular style books, but.
Sure. So what's your goal? I mean, you got this fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. It was easy to read. It was very, you don't have to be a psychologist to read it. And the stories in here, the testimonies are great. What's your goal though? Like, where do you want to be?
In general or with this book?
In general.
I mean, I want to sell millions of books. I want to help people let go of the past, overcome their problems, become who they want to be. But my future self is honestly, I'm going to probably go back to doing more missionary work style stuff, more from a leadership perspective though, since, we were talking about leadership. My mission experience really changed my life. And I like that audience. And I'm definitely, to be honest with you, getting a little sick of the self-help space. I think that there's a lot of weird voices, to be honest with you.
Well, you know what? I don't mean to step on you, and I
go ahead, man.
I shouldn't do that, but
you can.
I feel you, because it's like you get on Facebook and it's like everybody's a freaking self-help guru, right? They're just posting pictures of lions with inspirational quotes. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's like, you get some people that are, just basically telling you what you should be doing anyway, and it's like empowering them to, now they're on Instagram becoming famous and getting followers just because they're basically, I don't know, man. I don't know. You just triggered me, because it's like, I feel the same way you do. Like, the leadership to me is an area that I don't see a whole lot of people, besides yourself, writing about or talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And, admittedly, I'm spiritual and religious, and, I'm interested in that stuff as well. And so to answer your question more directly, I think in probably 2 to 3 years, I'll be pivoting away from a lot of the entrepreneurial activities I'm doing. I'll still be writing pop culture books, or pop psychology books to many degrees. But I'll be more focused on some more of my spiritual pursuits. And I've simplified my life a lot. I mean, I have 5 kids. We've got a 6th on the way. And, my life's quite requiring more simplicity on my part. So I've got to step away from a lot of the collaborations and things I'm entangled in.
It's awesome, man. What, if you don't mind me asking, like, what religious background?
More like, I mean, it's Christian, Latter-day Saint.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, I'm Catholic. So,
Awesome, man.
how has your religious background like influenced your like psychology philosophy?
You can't not have it be influenced. I mean, every psychologist has a bias. We see the world not as it is as we are. We see the world as we are. So, it's really interesting learning from various psychologists. Like, I really like Carol Dweck's work, by the way. She would be one I would put on that category. Her work, it goes very deep. I mean, even if you reread her book, it's really so. But a lot of psychologists have a fixed mindset. A lot of psychologists hate entrepreneurs. I mean, it's really interesting. Like, every psychologist has their own baggage. Every psychologist, and so for me, obviously my spiritual, my religious worldview very much impacts how I view psychology, what I focus on in psychology, what I think is interesting about psychology, what I emphasize, and why I study what I study. I mean, everyone studies what they study for a reason. And so in social science, there's a lot more bias than people like to give credit to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's your thoughts on like people that claim to be able to hypnotize or put someone in a deep consciousness and like, relive like past lives and things like that? What are your thoughts?
I don't know, man. I mean, I think there's definitely stuff to that. People are definitely hypnotizing people in some form or fashion. I think that that's definitely doable.
It's crazy. I love it. I find myself very curious, and I read quite a bit about those types of practices. I think I've been reading a lot about reincarnation too. And as a Catholic, I've been experiencing that kind of stuff, and that's what I like about this podcast is it spurs a lot of curiosity for me, like talking to people that are Paul Selig. I don't know if you know him or not. He's pretty tight with Aubrey Marcus, and we got together and he does like some channeling from guides that are he claims that are guides. They're like 7 guides or 9 guides, and they talk about who we really are, our true consciousness, our true being. And I think it's interesting because, we don't know. I mean, being a Catholic, it kind of goes against my teachings, but it's like, what, man, we're here. You might as well just learn about what you can and just, as long as you can keep that open mindset about, don't fall too far down that rabbit hole. I think that's what I like about psychology, man. It's just, it kind of, for me, it's like, it's creating that foundation to experience other things as well.
Yeah, I think that there's lots of things to study. I mean, I'm always studying many different things. I think it's tough to have discernment as far as what is like dark and versus what is good. But I love studying all sorts of stuff, and I think that we're required to do that. The moment you stop learning, and one of the things obviously I talk about in the book is that probably your views are quite different than they were 3 or 4 years ago. If you really dig deep, like how you see the world, what you emphasize, what you prioritize, what you've chosen some things, you've gone through some things that you have changed how you see the world, and your future self's going to be the same way. Your future self's going to see things differently than you see them now. So it's like, I recently reread Willpower Doesn't Work. And I was like, that's an interesting book, but the version of me today probably wouldn't write that book. I actually like the quote, "A painting is never finished. It simply ends in interesting places." And I know that my future self may say the same thing about personalities and permanent. That's like, it's an interesting book, but I wouldn't write that. My future self wouldn't write that. Hopefully they'd write a different book. And maybe they would disagree with aspects of that. And so as a result, I agree with you that you should always be learning and growing and not overly, you shouldn't overly own your current perspective or identity, because that can obviously stunt you.
No, absolutely. I think, you hit it right on the head. You shouldn't do that. I think you should just kind of give everything a chance. I think, right? Like, I don't know, like the reincarnation stuff, like I'm giving it a chance and just trying to understand a little bit more about the belief system. I mean, the East have believed that forever. It's the West that we're just kind of, I don't know, I'm learning more about, but it's funny how you don't know until you know, right? Like everyone's walking around like, I know I was like, walking around not really knowing anything about psychology or anything. I was just going along, my path, my journey. And it's like you start taking a step in one direction and one thing leads to another. And now, at first I was learning how to invest money, and that led me, all the way around to where I'm at today, where I'm building a podcast, where I am learning about, mind hacks, learning about the chemical. It's crazy where you start. I mean, I was reading about 401ks with, Tony Robbins in that one book, Money Master the Game. And now I'm reading about, what do I got over here? The Power of Flow, Stephen Kotler. the Seth books, Habits of a Happy Brain. Like, it's crazy how you take that one step and it leads you. I mean, you look back, hindsight's 2020, but you look back and it's like, man, I can't believe it's taken me this far.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think people who are constantly educating themselves definitely are far more likely to do interesting things. You know, you expand your perspective. I mean, my view of personality is that it's your comfort zone. You know, it's what's predictable. It's, you know, anything outside of that. And that's one of the reasons why trauma is tough, is because you essentially build a wall around your comfort zone and you don't want to see anything outside of that. But yeah, I mean, when you start expanding your perspectives and start seeing new things, then you have obviously new potential. You know, our 3 foster kids were a big, you know, story of that for me. You know, taking them out of just a totally limiting environment, putting them in our situation. Obviously, we hopefully have exposed them to a lot of things, but we've also had to grow in a lot of ways. So I think it is really interesting to see where it all takes you. It is also interesting to like watch yourself and to see what are you choosing to be interested in. You know, what are you choosing to be drawn to? And sometimes I've had to, you know, I've gone deep down various rabbit holes, and then I'm like, you know, after analyzing it and thinking about it for a long time, I'm like, how much did that actually develop or expand my perspective, or is it just information? And so I've had to, you know, I'm still constantly weeding through it and choosing hopefully better tunnels of information.
What, besides, you know, I know you're busy with the book right now, but like, what are you into right now as far as like personal development, self-growth?
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time studying from Dan Sullivan. Do you know who Dan is?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have 2 books coming out this year. We have a book with Hay House coming out in October, which is called Who Not How. It's mostly his ideas. Dan is like one of the top entrepreneurial coaches in the world. He's literally in his 70s. He like launched Peter Diamandis's Abundance 360, if you know what Abundance 360. Yeah, Dan's the one who launched that for Peter, and Peter always acknowledges Dan. But so I spent a lot of time studying Dan's work. Now, like I said, I'm kind of pulling that back even. I mean, I'll probably write another book with Dan, but I'm always interested in psychology. I'm always interested in self-growth. So I read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, twice during COVID-19. I mean, I've read the book many times. I don't know if you've read it.
It's right behind me, actually.
Let's see it. Yeah. Required reading, honestly.
Yeah, I take it wherever I go.
I'd be interested in your take on this, but I read that twice last month, and I've read it many a time in the past. But you know, meaning is obviously a big one. You know, Frankl said you have to have a future purpose in order to have meaning in the present. If you don't have a future to live for, if you don't have hope, then your present becomes unbearable. In the concentration camps, you die. So I'm definitely thinking a lot about meaning, preparation, having a future, having hope. Like, hope is essential in order to function as a human being. If you don't have hope for the future, you literally can't function in the present. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about Frankl and about things like anticipation, preparation. You know, people who weren't prepared in various ways for COVID-19 are in trouble. Like, how do you prepare for stuff like that? How do you actively prepare? That's kind of stuff I'm thinking about right now.
That's great. No, I view it the same way. I think, and another point is like, it doesn't matter. Like, they could take everything away from you, your freedom, essentially, like not that our freedoms are taken away, but we're quarantined, right? So it's like, the one thing they can't take away from you is your choice. Like, how are you going to adapt to that situation, right? Like, my choice is to continuously better myself, whether that's, you know, running, walking, going with the kids. You know, I just started taking the kids for a run with me, and it's a slow, painful run because it's like they're kids, right? But I get to spend time with them, and I get a little, you know, we don't go far, but it still counts. I mean, it's physical exercise. It's getting out and getting the dopamine hits, and it's getting that vitamin D and spending time with my kids. It's like, you know, they can take away your, you know, the ability to go to restaurants or whatever, go shopping outside, externally, whatever, wear masks, but they can't take away the options that you have as far as choices. Like, how is it going to make you, I guess, you know, they take away your freedom from the book. I'm trying to word this in the right way. They take away his freedom. They take away basically everything, his family, his rights. But they can't take away that choice of how you're going to, I guess, maintain that hope, maintain that inspiration that you will get out of there, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, it's a powerful thing. I mean, and this guy was in the concentration camps, like the worst possible place, hell on earth that you can be, and he's writing this book. I mean, it's inspirational.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing. You know, just because I have it in front of me.
Go ahead,
He
buddy.
said that he says this. He says, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning and purpose." That's pretty amazing.
That is amazing. I mean,
Yeah, he says a lot of great things. I mean, here's a few other quotes, just because literally they're right in front of me. He says, "Happiness cannot be attained by wanting to be happy. It must come as an unintended consequence of working for a goal greater than oneself."
Wasn't there a part in the book where he had like I guess he had a paper, right? He had like a scientific paper that he wrote, and then they took that from him. And like one of the things that got him through it was because he needed to write it. So he kept pushing on so that way he can get it out into the world. And thank God, man, because he wrote this fantastic book, and it's it's a must read for anyone and everyone.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, that's why he said he was able to get through it, is because he had a purpose beyond the concentration camp that he had to live for from his perspective. And so, the people who didn't see a purpose, their hope was shattered by the situation or by the trauma of everything they saw. They just lost the will to live. They lost the will to meaning, is what he would say. There was just no more meaning left in their life. This is another quote he said that's really interesting. He said, "It is a peculiarity of man that he can only live by looking to the future." I think that's kind of crucial, is that you can only really be present by actually working towards a future. If you don't have hope in the future, that's why I actually think it's bad advice to say that the future doesn't exist. It's bad advice to say that the past doesn't exist either, because like time is a lot more flowing than that. And like your past obviously impacts your present. If you didn't have memory, then you wouldn't even be able to have a conversation. But your future also really impacts your present, and so from Frankl's perspective, you can only live by looking to the future. That's his view of psychology. Freud was like, you have to look to the past. Frankl was, you have to look to the future, and you have to take responsibility for the present. And I much prefer Frankl.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is where I learned about existentialism. This is where I learned about, he said a quote of something about the existential vacuum, like on Sundays when we have that frightening feeling of the workday coming, Monday, it's an existential vacuum. And he just helped me, find that, because that's what we have it to compare. It's terrible. It's like what we have to compare to his book about concentration camp is Sunday nights when you get ready to go to work on Monday and you have this terrible feeling because you have to go do another 40-hour work week. It's like you can't even compare the two. But what he's trying to teach us is that you got to find, when you find meaning, it's like you're talking about the future self. It's like, what's your choice going to be? Are you going to accept the fact that you're going to be negative and negative about the work week and hate your life? Or are you going to be positive and take it as in this moment I'm going to be the most positive version that I can be and work on bettering myself and finding different ways to get through that terrible thought. I mean, it's just, I don't know. This book here is like definitely inspired me in so many different ways. And it's funny that we're just sitting here reading quotes. We can do a whole podcast about quotes.
The funny part is I'm working on the proposal for my next book, and it was deeply impacted by reading Frankl's book twice last month. And, just thinking about how you can't really be living consciously in the present unless you're actively preparing for and creating a future. And that's obviously, there's a lot of research on that, like you can't actually make quality decisions in the present unless you consider what your future self would want. And it's important to view your future self as a different person. They're going to have different perspectives, different preferences. But if you're only making decisions based on your current preferences, you might be setting your future self up for disaster. And obviously from a performance psychology perspective, you can't engage in deliberate practice, deliberate practice being like true learning without a clear future self in mind that has the attributes, situations that you want. Like it's deliberate practice, not just random practice.
Sure.
And so you have to kind of know where you're going in order to create a process to get you there.
Yeah, no, deliberate practice. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, I don't know if you're experiencing this, but with me, it was like, the more I put myself in my work, the more distracted I got from like my family and friends too. Right. Like, so I started reading the, what book is it? The Gita, where it talked, I don't know if you read that or not.
Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah. I can't ever say the first part, so I just say the Gita.
Yeah. I don't even know if I said it right, dude.
Well,
Admittedly, I haven't read it.
Well, it talks about like putting your effort into the work and trusting God, basically. Like, do the work, be about the work, give it to God, and that's it. Right? Where I was doing the work and hoping for people to like it, like I was just, it was the suffering that built up in my mind, because it's like, am I doing this enough? Am I doing this enough? Am I doing that? You're not doing that. You're not good enough. Blah blah blah. All these voices in your head. Like, I would consider like each podcast episode like a piece of art, and for that time, even during this interview, like presenting my entire self, no matter whatever that looks like, and being in it and connecting with you on a whole different level, and not caring about the results, but being here and dedicating my work and my effort to God, and trusting in that, and having faith that this work is for Him. And that's how I I worship Him. And then when I do my work, what my calling is I put it out to the world. It's for self-betterment. It's for people to listen to this and spark their interest and curiosities about what you're doing, what I'm doing. And maybe that inspires them. It builds a fire inside of them to get better. But then I just cut it off of that and just say, hey, look, this is my work. This is my world. This is what I'm doing. And not have any expectations, not have any wants or whatever, because that's where the suffering is. Because, psychology has shown, like, if like you put a guy in a room, you start talking, you put some numbers up. If the numbers go up, the guy feels good because he feels like people are listening to him. He starts talking about whatever, and the numbers go down, he's going to feel like shit. And it's all psychological. And a lot of my suffering was psychological. And it's like, to be a better person, to be a better me, I had to put myself in the work and work the garden and connect and have true relationships and authentic relationships. And, I love having conversations like this.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think I've had that same experience. It's definitely a balance. I definitely believe in outcomes, and I believe in committing to specific future. But at the same time, I like the quote, actually, expect everything attached to nothing. Because there's if you think, I'm a big NBA fan, you think about like Kobe Bryant and stuff, like, those guys definitely expected the shot to go in. And they were, you watch like The Last Dance about Michael Jordan, like the dude was serious about results. And so like, I think results matter, but I agree with you. He might not have been the happiest dude, and definitely was probably not the best family man. And so like, there are costs. But it's interesting because so for a long time, I was the top writer on medium.com, just to dominate that platform from 2015 to 2018, just destroyed that platform. People probably got really sick of me. It's really interesting though, because they changed the platform a lot over the last few years, and I stepped away from it and had one of the big things. There's a really good quote actually from Condoleezza Rice. She said, "I firmly believe you should never be the former anything." Kind of talking about like, don't over attach to your former success, or maybe even your former failure. If you're a former drug addict who's trying to get yourself out of that, like, you shouldn't overly identify with your former self. I don't really like the idea that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, as an example, but like, you shouldn't be the former anything. You shouldn't hold on to who you thought you were. Cause if I'm still that guy who's just like, I'm the number one writer on Medium, what does that say about my future goals, right? I'm obviously defined by my past, which is the worst thing you should do, because what got you here won't get you there. So I guess the only reason I bring all this up is I've watched a lot of people who were really top writers on Medium. Like when I was there, they change all the algorithms, they change everything, and all of a sudden their stats go down huge. And all of a sudden, like you're saying, like they just can't handle it. And so they leave the platform, because now like it's just too unbearable for the results to be difficult, because for so long they were so easy. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's really interesting. I've had to go through my own ups and downs. I've watched many casualties in this way. And, for me, it's more about the process is shaped by the goal. And if your future self is different from who you used to be, your process has got to be different too, but you still got to work that process and get better at it.
No, I'm like, I hear you on the future self. Like, I'm more of a moment man, like right now, because like, I feel like, with my studies and the reincarnation stuff, like the one thing that's really hit me, I was reading some Edgar Cayce stuff. I don't know if you heard of him or not.
I haven't.
He talks a lot about reincarnation, and his story is fascinating. He was like a Christian, hard believer Christian, and he had this gift where he could. It's Edgar Casey. It's like a pink purple book. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's like this. I have it somewhere around here. But anyway, he was a hardcore Christian. Had this gift of being able to go into this this sleep, I guess, hypnotic sleep, and being able to help people, diagnose them with like talk to the guides or whatever, and talk to these people and give them advice on how to get better. And then he started, to make a long story short, he went to like some philosophy stuff, some spiritual stuff, and he talked about reincarnation. And for me, it really tied together because it was, if we're reincarnating, if we're spirits of a higher consciousness, whatever, and we reincarnate with, our bodies, like we want to feel that human emotion. Like we want these experiences for whatever reasons, because it develops us as souls, as whatever beings. And so like right now, like what am I feeling right now when I'm talking to you? I'm feeling a connection. I'm feeling, similarities. I'm feeling, I want to read more of your stuff and connect with you more. And, the soul, I mean, it's just crazy. It's just like things that I read, things that I've learned about reincarnation. It's like, be in the moment. The gift, this is the gift. This is God's gift right now. Like,
what actually does reincarnation mean? Like, I've obviously studied it to some degree, but like, what is it? What, as a concept, and I'm not trying to throw you on the spot. Like what actually is reincarnation at like a basic level?
Basic level to me. So the way that I believe it is, like, you pass on from this world, you reincarnate into, your soul goes into the higher self or whatever, and then comes back down and reincarnates into another body, right? So like the soul never, and soul is energy, right?
Does it keep coming back to this same place though?
Well, different lifetimes, right? Like, so
Sure.
Some of the past life regressions that I've been learning about, like, a lot of them have been like 1800s recently, just from the books. I don't know if it's true or not, but some of the books that I've been reading about reincarnation, a lot of people have lived in the 1800s or whatever, just a pattern. And so they'll live their lives, they'll perish from this earth, and then they'll go up to the higher being, the higher realm, and then they'll choose whether or not they've learned their lessons, whether their soul has progressed to the point where it can stay there, wherever it is, whether it's heaven or whatever, or where it can come back down and, get another life experience. But, we choose essentially we choose the lives that we want to live and learn, and we choose the lessons that we need to learn. So, whether that be someone who comes back and wants to live and get that experience as an alcoholic or a writer or a podcaster or whatever experience that may be, but it's chosen, and karma has a lot to do with it too. So like, I'm just scratching at the surface of this whole philosophical idea. And again, I'm only one-on-one in it, so I'm just learning it. But
yeah, no,
reincarnation.
I know that I heard Dave Asprey talking about it on a Tom Bilyeu interview once. He was talking about, I think he believes in reincarnation as well.
Yeah, no, so there's this guy in DC, Dr. Joseph Mancini. Him and I talk a little bit, and his whole book, Present Power, Past Lives, and it talks a lot about the reincarnation. So like, I'm just learning about it. It's just, but it makes sense to me, dude. Like, I'm Catholic, and I definitely believe there was a Jesus. I believe in all of that, and I believe that he died for our sins, and I believe that entire story. I don't want to believe that we're here one time to live perfectly like he did, and I'm sorry to talk about religion, but
no, go ahead, man. It's your podcast, dude. It's freaking awesome.
I just feel like we're not here to live one time perfect, because it won't happen. Like, and then the people, obviously you keep asking for forgiveness, but it's like, we're just, I would like to believe that we come back and we have these lessons and we forget those past lives. I mean, there's been, some crazy stories of like little kids remembering past lives of like being in the military and describing events, how they died. And it's like, what? Like, one kid was like an Air Force pilot, and he described like the people that he had served with and like named names. And like, it was like, what? Like, this little kid was naming names. They went back and did the research because it was like in World War II, and there they are. And he's like pointing out, that's me right there. And it's nuts. I mean, sorry to bring it up, man, but
No, you don't have to, dude. I asked. Definitely don't apologize to me for a spiritual / religion. I don't really subscribe fully to that viewpoint, but I believe in a past life. I believe that from a purely spiritual perspective, I believe everyone lived before we came here. 100%. We lived with God. It was a choice to come here. It's very similar. I don't believe we come multiple times. That's my take, but I believe that life doesn't stop after this. I believe that we're not perfect when we finish, that most of the education happens after this life. I don't believe we come back as multiple beings, but I don't have anything against, obviously, the belief in reincarnation. It's just not what I subscribe to. Sure. I think that there's a lot of things within that, though, that really resonate with how I see things. I definitely believe we had a long pre-earth life and that there was a ton of education. Although I believe you were you and I believe I was me, just underdeveloped, and that this is a life for learning lessons. The goal is not perfection, and that there's way more lessons after this life.
Sure. But,
as far as the specifics, yeah, like I've got some differences with reincarnation, but I've got nothing against you sharing them with me at all. No. I like learning about it.
Sure. No, my wife looks at me like, and her head starts turning around. Like, she's like, what are you talking about? Because she's hardcore Catholic too. And my mom as well. It's just funny. It's just, like I said, being open to something and just following your curiosities. I know you're short on time. What time do you have to go?
I've got to go in about 5 minutes.
All right. But getting back to you, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm not saying that to say that because you're on my show, but I'm saying it because I think it's the basic for people to read and kind of understand about personality and how we're not that, right? Like, if you had to basically sum up your book to someone who is, learning about this right now, like, what would you say? Like, how would you describe your book to them?
Yeah, I would say that most kind of common views of personality is that your personality is innate. It's non-changeable. This is kind of pop culture views, that you are who you are kind of thing. That's actually how Myers-Briggs and them viewed personality. And the personality is something you must discover. And once you discover it, you can then finally build the life you're supposed to live. You can set goals based on your personality. You can find that perfect match, that perfect spouse based on your personality. And to me, that's not good. Not a good view of the science, but it's also a very limiting view of the person. A very kind of, you're born a circle, and you can only fit through circles. You can't fit through square holes, or square pegs. So I would say the ultimate premise of my book is this, that, common view is that your goals should come from your personality. My perspective is your personality should come from your goals. Kind of like Frankel, you've got to have a purpose to strive for. Also, there's many things that you could reframe, often something like trauma, or just your identity story, the way you describe yourself could be the thing shaping you. And you can change those things. You can change your environment. You can be very purposeful about who you want to be, and you can make big change. Not easy. It's essentially, it's never easy to go outside your comfort zone. It's never easy to handle uncertainty. But that's how you build what's called psychological flexibility. That's how you build confidence. And so, yeah, my invitation for people is to, decide who they want to be in the future and have that thing be the basis for who they are today, and let go of who they've been in the past. Doesn't mean you have to be angry at your past. But your past doesn't need to be the thing that's predicting who you are. Your past actually can also be changed. This is kind of a Christian perspective, but I'm teaching it from a neuroscience perspective, that your memories and the meanings of the past definitely can change. What was maybe a trauma can definitely be a lesson learned. Something that used to be funny is no longer funny. So we view the past from the lens of our current self. And, you can change the meanings of the past. You can let go of who you once were, and your future should be the thing guiding who you want to be. That's my take. Your goals should shape who you are.
I love it, dude. Ben, this has been amazing, dude. How can people connect with you?
BenjaminHardy.com is my website. Got all my blog posts there. You can definitely get free online courses there. And yeah, I just invite people to check out Personality Isn't Permanent. There's like 150 journal prompts for reframing trauma, for designing your future self, for making better decisions. So yeah, I think it's a different take, but I think, like what you said, it really can lay the foundation for people.
Ben, dude, this has been fun. I love it. I love having conversations like this, where it goes anywhere. Thank you so much for joining the show, brother.
Dude, it was really cool, Trey. Thanks for opening up so much, and thanks for letting me be on your show.
I want to say thank you to Dr. Ben Hardy for coming on the show and hanging out with me and just ripping it up in our conversation. I want to say thank you to my wife, Marissa, for making her Your Superior Self debut. I've been trying for 2 years to get her on the show, and I finally have her on tape making fun of me. So thank you, Marissa. I love you. Thank you so much for your support. You're a funny girl. Please go to yoursuperiorself.com. Check me out over there. Follow me on Instagram, tdowns80, and on Twitter, DownsTrey. Guys, thank you guys so much for downloading. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast from. It helps me scale this show, and it helps me get this out to those who might need to hear it. So thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you later.